Captain Taemin Park stood in the Great Hall of Unity's Promise and felt small. The space station was huge beyond anything humans had ever built. It stretched for kilometers in every direction and housed 12 different alien species that ruled the galaxy. The walls were made of crystal that changed colors when different aliens walked past. The ceiling showed stars and planets moving in real time. Everything here was designed to make visitors feel tiny and unimportant. Taemin wore his best uniform, but it looked plain next to what the aliens wore. The Kythera had bodies made of living crystal that sparkled with inner light. The Luminari looked like they were made of pure energy wrapped in flowing robes. The Cortani had thick gray skin and stood 3 meters tall. Each species looked powerful and ancient and wise. Behind Taemin stood the rest of Earth's delegation. Dr. Soo-Jin Lee carried a case full of research that had taken her team 5 years to complete. Commander Bo-Ram Kim had battle plans that could change how wars were fought. Engineer Woo-Bin Choi held designs for new technology that could help every species in the galaxy. They had all worked so hard to get here and to prove that humans could contribute something important. The council sat on floating platforms that moved in slow circles around the center of the room. Councillor Vextar of the Kythera spoke first. His voice sounded like music played on glass instruments, but his words were cold and cutting. "The human delegation requests to join advanced research projects," he said. "They want to help design new weapons and ships. They want to participate in strategic planning for our defense against external threats." Other council members made sounds that might have been laughter in their species. High Admiral Korthan of the massive Cortani leaned forward on his platform. "Humans have been part of our coalition for 150 years, he said in a voice like grinding stone. "In all that time, they have shown us what they are capable of. They clean our stations. They prepare our food. They maintain basics, systems that require no real skill or intelligence." Taemin felt his hands clench into fists, but forced himself to stay calm. This was exactly what humans were criticized for, showing too much emotion. He made his face blank and waited. Dr. Soo-Jin Lee stepped forward when Vextar gestured for her to speak. She opened her case and pulled out a small device that glowed with soft blue light. "Honorable council members," she began, "we have developed something new. This is a quantum biological interface. It can connect directly with living tissue and repair damage at the cellular level. It works with any species we have tested. It could eliminate most diseases and extend lifespans by hundreds of years." She held up the device and it pulsed with warm light. "We tested it on samples from all 12 council species. The results show it can cure the wasting sickness that affects Kythera. It can stop the energy drain that shortens luminary lives. It can heal the bone rot that cripples elderly Cortani." The council platform stopped moving. Several aliens leaned forward to look at the small device. For a moment, Taemin felt hope. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe they would finally see that humans could create something valuable. Councillor Zephyra of the Luminari spoke in a voice like wind chimes. "This device appears to be biological in nature. Such crude organic technology is unstable and dangerous. The Luminari achieved immortality through energy transcendence. The Kythera achieve perfect health through crystal matrix harmony. Why would advanced species need such primitive methods?" Dr. Soo-Jin Lee looked confused. "But the tests show it works. We have documented proof that it can help every species here. The biological component isn't primitive, it's adaptive. It learns and grows, and improves itself over time." Vextar made a sound like breaking glass. "Humans always think their emotional attachment to biology makes them special. You cannot understand that evolution means leaving such limitations behind. Your device may work in your crude tests, but it lacks the precision and reliability of true technology." Commander Bo-Ram Kim stepped forward next. She activated a holographic display that showed star maps and battle formations. "Council members," she said, "we have studied the attacks by the Shadow Fleet. Their tactics follow patterns that human strategists recognize. We can predict where they will strike next and how to counter their movements." The display showed colorful lights moving through space as Bo-Ram Kim explained her plans. The formations were complex and beautiful and made perfect sense to Taemin. But he could see the council members were not impressed. High Admiral Korthan stood up on his platform. His huge form cast shadows across the room. "Human," he said. "The Cortani have been warriors for 10,000 years. We have conquered entire star systems through strength and discipline. Your species still feels fear in battle. You run when you should fight. You hesitate when you should act. How can cowards understand warfare?" Bo-Ram Kim's face turned red, but she kept her voice steady. "Fear makes us careful. It makes us think about protecting our people. It makes us find ways to win without losing everything we care about. Our strategies work because we understand that every life has value." Several council members made sounds that were definitely laughter this time. Counselor Ithsek of the insect-like Zarathi clicked his mandibles. "Sentimental thinking leads to defeat. The strong survive and the weak perish. This is the natural order that governs all successful species." Engineer Woobin Choi was the last to present. He showed designs for new types of ships and stations that could adapt and change based on what was needed. The technology looked organic and flowing instead of rigid and mechanical. "These designs learn from their environment," he explained. "They can repair themselves and improve their own functions. They work with biological crews instead of replacing them." Vextar studied the designs for several minutes before speaking. "More biological contamination," he said. "Advanced species build perfect machines that never fail or change. Why would we want technology that thinks for itself? Why would we want ships that might develop emotions or unpredictable behaviors?" Woobin Choi looked at his designs and then at the council. "Because adaptation is strength," he said quietly. "Because change means growth. Because the galaxy is full of surprises, and rigid systems break when they meet something unexpected." The council platforms arranged themselves in a circle, and the aliens spoke in their own languages for several minutes. Taemin could not understand the words, but he could read body language well enough. The decision was already made. Counselor Vextar spoke for all of them. "The human proposals are rejected. Your technology is too primitive and unreliable. Your strategies are based on emotional weakness rather than logical strength. Your designs show the same biological limitations that hold your species back." Paused and looked directly at Taemin. "Humans will continue in their current roles within the coalition. You provide useful services in food preparation and basic maintenance. These are important functions that match your capabilities. Perhaps it is time your species learned to find satisfaction in work that suits your nature." Counselor Zephyra added her own final comment as the platforms began to drift apart. "Some species are meant to lead, and others to serve. There is no shame in accepting your limitations and finding peace in simpler pursuits. The galaxy needs workers as much as it needs thinkers." The human delegation stood in the center of the Great Hall as the council members floated away to discuss more important matters. Their carefully prepared presentations lay scattered on the floor where they had been casually dismissed. Years of work and hope reduced to nothing in less than an hour. Taemin looked at his team and saw his own feelings reflected in their faces. Anger and disappointment and something else. Determination. Woobin Choi bent down and carefully collected all their rejected research. Soo-Jin Lee packed her quantum biological interface back in its case. Bo-Ram Kim rolled up her tactical displays. They walked out of the Great Hall in silence, but Taemin could feel something changing. The aliens had just made a very big mistake. They thought they had put humans in their place, but they had actually shown humans exactly where they stood. And now, everyone knew what needed to be done about it. 6 months later, Director Hyewan Jang sat in the emergency meeting room deep beneath Seoul and looked at faces she had known for decades. The room was simple and plain with white walls and basic furniture, but the people gathered here represented every human colony and settlement in the galaxy. They had come from Mars and Europa and the mining stations around Jupiter. They had traveled from distant worlds where humans grew food for alien species or maintained machines that aliens considered too simple to bother with. The meeting had been called with a single coded message sent through channels the Coalition did not monitor. The message was just 3 words, but everyone understood what they meant. The time had come to make a choice about humanity's future. Captain Taemin Park stood at the front of the room and told the story of what had happened at Unity's Promise. He spoke in a calm voice, but everyone could hear the anger underneath. He described how the council had dismissed their research without even looking at it properly. He explained how they had been told to accept their place as servants and workers and nothing more. When he finished speaking, the room was completely silent. Director Jiang looked around at all the faces and saw the same expression on each one. They were tired of being told they were not good enough. They were tired of watching their children grow up believing they could never be anything more than cleaning crews and food service workers. Dr. Sujin Lee spoke first. "The quantum biological interfaces work," she said. "We have tested them on volunteers from 17 different species. The healing rates are faster than anything the Coalition uses. The technology adapts and improves itself with each use. But they called it primitive because it involves biological processes." Commander Bo-Ram Kim stood up next. "Our tactical analyses have been correct in every simulation we have run. When the Shadow Fleet attacked the Zarathi colonies, our predictions were accurate down to the exact timing and target locations. But the Coalition ignored our warnings, and 17 million Zarathi died because their rigid strategies failed." Engineer Wu Bin Choi pulled out a small device that looked like a metal flower. When he touched it, the petals opened and began to glow. "This is adaptive architecture," he said. "Buildings and ships that learn and grow and change based on what their inhabitants need. The Coalition builds everything from dead materials that never change. When something breaks, they replace it. When needs change, they build something entirely new. This technology repairs itself and evolves to meet new challenges." Admiral Dae-Hyun Song walked to the front of the room and activated a holographic display. Star maps appeared in the air showing sectors of space that were marked in red. "These are uncharted regions beyond Coalition space," he said. "Our deep space probes have found 43 worlds that could support human life. The Coalition does not know these worlds exist because they only explore in straight lines using their rigid navigation systems." He pointed to one system that glowed brighter than the others. "This world has an entire continent of empty land with fresh water and breathable atmosphere. The soil is rich and fertile. There are no intelligent native species to displace. It could support a population of 50 million humans within 20 years. The display changed to show ship designs that looked unlike anything in the Coalition fleet. The hulls were smooth and curved like living things. The engines used principles that human scientists had discovered but never been allowed to implement. "We have been building these ships in secret for 3 years, Admiral Song continued. They use quantum tunneling drives that do not require the exotic matter that Coalition ships need. They are faster and more efficient, and they can be manufactured using resources found on any world with heavy metals." Director Jiang stood up and looked around the room. "The Coalition has made their position clear," she said. "They believe humans are useful for simple tasks but incapable of advanced thinking or innovation. They want us to be grateful for the privilege of serving them. They want our children to grow up believing they are inferior to every other species in the galaxy." She paused and let her words sink in. "I propose we show them exactly how wrong they are. I propose we leave Coalition space entirely and build our own civilization among the stars. I propose we prove that human worth is not determined by alien opinions." Psychologist Kyung-Ho Lim raised his hand to speak. "The Coalition sees emotions as weakness," he said. "They believe that fear and love and anger make us unstable and unreliable. But emotions are what make us strong. Fear drives us to find better solutions. Love inspires us to sacrifice for each other. Anger gives us the energy to fight when everything seems hopeless. Hope lets us believe we can accomplish impossible things." He walked to the center of the room. "Every major human achievement has been driven by emotion. We went to space because we dreamed of touching the stars. We developed faster-than-light travel because we wanted to see what was beyond our solar system. We joined the Coalition because we hoped to find friends among the stars. Now we will leave the Coalition because we refuse to accept limitations that others try to place on us." Xenobiologist Yoon-Ju Park activated her own display, showing dozens of different alien species. "Humans are not the only ones the Coalition treats as inferior," she said. "The Valdris are peaceful traders who are considered too weak for important decisions. The Himari are brilliant engineers who are only allowed to work on basic construction projects. The Tlaxani are natural diplomats who are ignored because they prefer negotiation to conquest." The display showed communication logs and meeting records. I have been in contact with representatives from 37 species that the Coalition considers lesser races. They are tired of being dismissed and marginalized. They are interested in joining a new alliance based on cooperation rather than hierarchy. Chief Engineer Mi Young-han stood up and smiled for the first time in months. We have shipyards hidden in asteroid fields throughout the solar system, she said. We have manufacturing facilities on moons that the Coalition has never bothered to survey. We have been preparing for this day since the first time they told us we were not smart enough to understand advanced technology. She activated another display showing massive construction projects. We can build a fleet of 500 ships within 18 months. Each ship can carry 10,000 people with everything they need to establish a new colony. We have the technology to make this work. We have the resources to make it happen. All we need is the will to take the first step. The room erupted in discussion as people began to understand the scope of what was being proposed. This was not just about leaving the Coalition. This was about creating an entirely new civilization that would be based on human values and human methods. It would be a place where emotions were seen as strengths rather than weaknesses. It would be a society where adaptation and innovation were encouraged rather than feared. Director Jang called for quiet and waited until everyone was listening. This will not be easy, she said. We will be leaving behind everything we have built in Coalition space. We will be starting over on worlds that have never known intelligent life. We will face challenges that we cannot even imagine yet. She looked directly at each person in the room. But we will be free to succeed or fail based on our own efforts. We will not have to ask permission to think new thoughts or try new methods. Our children will grow up believing they can accomplish anything they set their minds to. We will build something that is truly ours. The vote was unanimous. Every human colony and settlement chose to join the exodus. Within days, the secret preparations that had been years in the making shifted into open action. Ships that had been hidden began moving toward predetermined gathering points. Scientists who had been working on rejected projects suddenly had unlimited resources and support. The Coalition would learn soon enough that humanity was leaving, but by then, it would be too late to stop them. The bridges would be burned and the die would be cast. Humans would either build something magnificent in the unknown regions of space or they would die trying. Either way, they would do it as free people who refused to accept that their worth was determined by others. As the meeting ended and people began to leave, Director Jang remained behind with a small group of senior officials. They had the hardest job of all, deciding exactly how to tell the Coalition that humanity was withdrawing from galactic civilization. The message would need to be polite but firm. It would need to make clear that this was not a negotiation or a request. It was simply a statement of what was going to happen. Captain Taemin Park volunteered to deliver the message personally. He had been there when the Council dismissed human worth. It seemed fitting that he should be there to tell them exactly what that dismissal was going to cost them. The price would be higher than they could possibly imagine. 18 months later, the first signs appeared, but nobody in the Coalition paid attention at first. A mining station near the edge of Cortani space simply stopped responding to communications. When a patrol ship arrived to investigate, they found the facility completely abandoned, but still running. All the equipment was in perfect working order, but every human worker had vanished without a trace. The same thing happened at a food processing plant that supplied protein to 12 different alien colonies. The luminary managers arrived one morning to find the facility empty but clean. Every machine had been properly shut down and secured. All the safety protocols had been followed. There was no sign of struggle or emergency evacuation. The humans had simply disappeared, as if they had never been there at all. Captain Young-Soo Kang stood on the bridge of the research vessel Harmony and watched the last Coalition patrol ship disappear into hyperspace. His ship carried 50,000 human scientists and engineers who had been working on projects throughout Coalition space. For weeks, they had been quietly gathering data and equipment while maintaining their normal routines. Now they were free to begin the journey to the new worlds that waited beyond the edge of known space. The Harmony was not alone. Across the galaxy, hundreds of ships were beginning their own journeys toward freedom. Some carried entire families from established colonies. Others held specialists and their equipment. A few transported the most valuable resources that humans had discovered or developed during their time in Coalition space. On the surface, everything appeared normal, but Maintenance Chief Sungmin Oh knew better. He walked through the corridors of Unity's promise and saw systems beginning to fail in small but important ways. The quantum recyclers that processed waste from a dozen different species were starting to malfunction because humans had been the only ones who truly understood how they worked. The air filtration systems that kept the station habitable for so many different life forms were showing stress indicators that would lead to failure within months. O had trained hundreds of alien technicians over the years, but none of them had developed the intuitive understanding that humans brought to complex systems. They could follow procedures and replace components, but they could not feel when something was beginning to go wrong. They could not sense the subtle changes that indicated a machine was under stress or developing problems. Agricultural specialist Hei Rin Moon supervised the shutdown of food production facilities on 17 different worlds. These were not simple farms, but complex operations that created nutrition suitable for species with completely different biological needs. The Kythera required minerals that were toxic to most organic life. The Luminary needed energy-rich compounds that would burn through the digestive systems of other species. The Zerathi ate substances that were literally poisonous to everyone else. Human scientists had spent decades learning how to produce safe food for every coalition species using methods that were efficient and sustainable. They had developed bacterial cultures and chemical processes that could transform basic organic matter into whatever any species needed to survive. Without this knowledge, the coalition would face food shortages within months and starvation within years. Dr. Junho Yoon packed the last of his medical research and looked around the laboratory that had been his home for 20 years. He had quietly treated patients from every coalition species and had discovered cures for diseases that their own doctors considered incurable. The Kythera suffered from crystal rot that slowly destroyed their mineral matrix bodies. The Cortani developed bone diseases that left them unable to move. The Luminari experienced energy drain that could kill them in days. Each species had their own medical traditions, but none of them understood cross-species medicine. They could treat their own people, but they had no idea how to help members of other species. Only humans seemed capable of seeing the common patterns that connected all life forms. Only human doctors could develop treatments that worked across species barriers. Yoon had been discreetly sharing his knowledge with other human medical personnel throughout Coalition space, but he had never published his research or trained alien doctors in his methods. The Coalition medical establishment had dismissed his work as primitive biological tinkering. Now they would discover what they had lost when the first plague struck, and they had no idea how to stop it. Ambassador Jin-A Yoon arrived at Unity's promise for the last time and requested an immediate audience with the full Coalition Council. She had served as Earth's representative for 15 years and had endured countless dismissals and insults with diplomatic grace. Today, she would deliver a message that she had been looking forward to giving for months. The council assembled in their great hall, and Councillor Vextar spoke with his usual condescending tone. Ambassador Yoon, he said, we have received reports of some irregularities in human behavior recently. Several facilities have been abandoned without proper notification. We trust there is a reasonable explanation for these minor disruptions. Jin-A Yoon stood in the center of the hall and activated a recording device that would broadcast her words throughout Coalition space. Honorable Council members, she began, I am here to deliver formal notice that humanity is withdrawing from the Galactic Coalition effective immediately. All human citizens renounce their Coalition membership and are departing for independent space. The Council platforms stopped moving and several aliens made sounds of surprise or disbelief. High Admiral Corthan leaned forward with interest rather than concern. Where exactly do humans think they can go? He asked. Coalition space extends to the edge of explored territory. There is nothing beyond our borders except empty space and hostile environments. Jin-A Yoon smiled for the first time since entering the hall. Humans have always been good at finding opportunities in places where others see only problems, she said. We have discovered worlds that your rigid exploration methods missed. We have developed technology that makes those worlds habitable. We have built ships that can take us anywhere we want to go. Councillor Zafira made her wind chime laugh. This is obviously an emotional outburst caused by your species' psychological instability, she said. Humans cannot survive outside Coalition protection. You lack the technology and knowledge necessary for independent space travel. You will return within a few years begging for readmission. The ambassador looked at each council member in turn before responding. Perhaps you are right, she said. Perhaps we will fail and die in the attempt. But we would rather die free than live as servants to species who see us as inferior. We would rather build something of our own than spend eternity being told what we cannot accomplish. She paused and let her words echo through the hall. You measured our worth by your own limitations and found us lacking. You saw our emotions and called them weaknesses. You saw our adaptability and called it primitive. You saw our hope and called it foolishness. Now you will discover what those qualities can accomplish when they are not held back by your expectations. Vexitar's crystal body flickered with annoyed colors. What exactly do humans think they contributed to Coalition civilization? He demanded. You performed basic maintenance and simple service functions. These roles can be filled by any species with adequate training. Jinayun activated a holographic display that showed statistics from across Coalition space. Human. Workers maintain critical systems on 40,000 facilities, she said. Human doctors treat cross-species diseases that kill millions of your people each year. Human agricultural specialists produce food that keeps 17 worlds from starvation. Human engineers design solutions to problems that your rigid thinking cannot solve. The display changed to show failure rates and maintenance schedules. Your machines work because humans understand how to listen to them. Your people stay healthy because humans understand how life functions across species barriers. Your colonies survive because humans understand how to adapt to changing conditions, she closed the display and prepared to leave. You dismissed our contributions because you saw only the simple tasks and not the complex knowledge behind them. You will understand our true value only in our absence. We thank the Coalition for the learning experience. Captain So-hee Bay commanded the last human transport to leave Coalition space. The New Dawn carried 10,000 people who had volunteered to stay until the very end to make sure critical systems continued functioning as long as possible. They had worked extra shifts to train alien replacements and had left detailed instructions for everything they could think of. As the ship crossed the boundary into unexplored space, Bay activated the communication system one final time. Her message was broadcast to every Coalition facility and ship within range. This is Captain So-hee Bay of the Human Transport New Dawn, she said. We are the last humans to leave Coalition space. We depart as we lived among you, underestimated and undervalued. She looked at the star charts that showed their destination and the new worlds that waited for humanity among the distant stars. You will understand our worth only in our absence. We leave you with the consequences of your choices. We go to build something better. The New Dawn engaged its quantum tunneling drive and disappeared into the vast unknown regions beyond Coalition space. 3 years after the human exodus, High Admiral Korthen stood in the command center of the Coalition's greatest battleship and watched his fleet being destroyed. The Shadow Fleet had launched their largest offensive yet, and every tactical response the Coalition tried was failing catastrophically. Ships that had never known defeat were being torn apart by enemy formations that seemed to anticipate every move before it was made. The Cortani Admiral's massive fists clenched as another squadron disappeared from his tactical display. He had dismissed human strategic recommendations as emotional weakness, but now he could see the patterns they had tried to warn him about. The Shadow Fleet was using adaptive tactics that changed based on Coalition responses. The rigid military doctrine that had served for millennia was useless against an enemy that learned and evolved during each engagement. On his home world, Counselor Vextar watched crystal rot spread through the Kithra population faster than anyone had thought possible. The disease attacked the mineral matrix that formed their bodies and left them weak and dying. Human doctors had been treating this condition for decades with methods that Kithira medical specialists had never understood or bothered to learn. Dr. Talmair worked desperately in his laboratory, trying to recreate the quantum biological interfaces that humans had offered years ago. He had access to all their published research and detailed technical specifications, but every attempt at construction ended in failure. The technology required an understanding of biological systems that no Kythera possessed. It needed an intuitive grasp of how living processes could be integrated with quantum mechanics. The interface devices required emotional input to function properly. They needed to sense fear and hope and love and anger in order to adapt their healing protocols to individual patients. Kythera had transcended such primitive feelings millennia ago, and now that transcendence was killing them. They could not make the devices work because they could not understand the very emotions they had dismissed as weakness. Economic reports from across coalition space painted an increasingly desperate picture. Counselor Ithsek read through failure statistics that seemed impossible to believe. Food production had collapsed on 17 worlds because the complex biochemical processes that humans had developed could not be replicated by other species. The Zarathi were facing starvation because no one else understood how to synthesize the toxic compounds their species required for nutrition. Transportation networks were breaking down as maintenance systems failed without human workers to keep them running. The aliens had assumed that following technical manuals would be sufficient, but they discovered that machines required more than written procedures. They needed workers who could feel when something was wrong and adapt their methods to solve unexpected problems. Space stations throughout coalition territory were experiencing life support failures that their automated systems could not diagnose or repair. The luminary engineers who took over human duties could follow instructions perfectly, but they had no instinct for troubleshooting complex integrated systems. When problems arose that were not covered in the technical documentation, they had no idea how to respond. Meanwhile, reconnaissance probes brought disturbing news about what humans were accomplishing in their new territories. The Meridian Republic had been established on a world that should have been barely habitable, according to coalition surveys. Instead of struggling to survive, the humans were thriving beyond anything the aliens had thought possible. President Chang Ho Kim had overseen the construction of cities that blended technology with natural systems in ways that no coalition species had ever imagined. The buildings grew like living things and adapted to the needs of their inhabitants. The transportation systems flowed like rivers and carried people wherever they needed to go without rigid schedules or predetermined routes. The human capital showcased architectural marvels that seemed to breathe and change and respond to the emotions of the people who lived there. Parks and gardens were integrated into every structure so that the boundary between natural and artificial became meaningless. The entire city felt alive in a way that sterile coalition facilities never had. Agricultural reports showed that human colonies were producing food surpluses that they shared freely with any species willing to join their alliance. They had developed farming methods that worked with planetary ecosystems instead of fighting against them. Their crops were healthier and more nutritious than anything grown using traditional coalition techniques. Admiral Nara Singh had been born in coalition space, but her parents were human refugees who had fled Earth during the early years of alien contact. She had risen through coalition ranks despite constant discrimination and had commanded her own battle group for 5 years. When coalition forces attempted to force the Valdris to take over abandoned human duties, she finally reached her breaking point. Singh broadcast her resignation throughout the fleet before jumping to hyperspace with every ship under her command. Her message was simple and direct. I have seen what we can build when we are not told what we cannot do. I have watched humans accomplish impossible things, while aliens called them primitive. I choose to join people who judge worth by results rather than prejudice. Her defection triggered a cascade of similar departures as other mixed-species crews chose to abandon the coalition rather than participate in its increasingly desperate attempts to force lesser races into human roles. The Valdris traders who were being pressed into maintenance work fled to human space with their entire merchant fleet. The Hamari engineers, who were ordered to take over food production systems, requested asylum with the Free Worlds Alliance. The coalition's newest crisis came from an unexpected source. Dozens of species that had been marginalized for centuries began requesting permission to join the human territories. The Free Worlds Alliance was offering something the coalition had never provided: equality and respect and the chance to contribute according to ability rather than species prejudice. Scientific reports confirmed what coalition leaders were beginning to fear. Human technology was advancing at rates that seemed impossible according to established theories. Without the restrictions imposed by coalition doctrine, human scientists were developing innovations that challenged fundamental assumptions about what was achievable. Their ships were faster and more efficient than anything in the coalition fleet. Their medical technology could cure diseases that had been considered incurable for millennia. Their agricultural methods could make desert worlds bloom and toxic environments habitable. Their adaptive architecture could build cities that seemed more like living organisms than mechanical constructions. Most disturbing of all were reports that the Free Worlds Alliance was attracting the attention of unknown alien species from regions beyond coalition space. Deep space monitors detected massive ships using technology that surpassed anything the coalition possessed. These mysterious vessels seemed to be making contact with human colonies rather than coalition worlds. High Admiral. Corps then received intelligence reports suggesting that the Shadow Fleet attacks were not random raids, but some kind of test or evaluation. The enemy seemed to be studying coalition responses and measuring their capabilities against unknown standards. The attacks had intensified after the human exodus, as if their departure had triggered some kind of escalation. Emergency sessions of the Coalition Council became daily occurrences as crisis reports flooded in from every sector. Systems that had functioned perfectly for centuries were failing faster than they could be repaired. Species that had been loyal coalition members for millennia were requesting permission to migrate to human space. The carefully maintained hierarchy that had governed galactic civilization was collapsing under the weight of its own rigidity. Counselor Vextar found himself in the unprecedented position of actually missing the humans he had dismissed so casually. Their emotional outbursts and primitive thinking had been annoying, but their solutions had actually worked. Their adaptability had solved problems that proper coalition methods could not address. Their biological approach to technology had produced results that crystal matrix science could not replicate. The reports from human space painted a picture of a civilization that was growing stronger every day while the coalition grew weaker. The Free Worlds Alliance welcomed refugees and immigrants from any species willing to contribute to their society. They judged people by their actions rather than their species' characteristics. They encouraged innovation rather than demanding conformity to established patterns. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Coalition faced the possibility that they were not the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. The humans they had dismissed as primitive servants were building something that surpassed anything the Coalition had ever achieved. The price of their arrogance was being paid in blood and failure and the slow collapse of everything they had considered permanent and unchanging. The greatest irony was that the solution to their problems existed in the databases and research files that humans had left behind. The medical treatments and technological innovations and strategic insights were all there waiting to be implemented. 5 years after the Exodus, Scout Commander Eugene Lee returned to Coalition space aboard a ship that moved like liquid light through the void. The vessel bore no resemblance to anything in the Coalition fleet or the Free Worlds Alliance. Its hull seemed to flow and shift as if it were alive, and its passage through space left trails of energy that looked like Aurora dancing among the stars. Eugene had volunteered for the most dangerous mission in human history, making contact with the species responsible for the Shadow Fleet attacks. What she had discovered beyond the edge of known space would change everything that every civilization in the galaxy thought they understood about their place in the universe. The Coalition Council assembled in emergency session when her ship was detected approaching Unity's promise. The space station was in worse condition than it had ever been. Life support systems failed daily and were patched with temporary solutions that everyone knew would not last. The population had been reduced by half as species, after species abandoned the Coalition to seek better lives elsewhere. Eugene stood before the 12 council members and saw defeat in every alien face. Counselor Vexitar's crystal body was dim and cracked from the diseases that were killing his people. High Admiral Corthen had lost 3 more fleets to Shadow Fleet attacks, and his proud military was reduced to defensive actions around core worlds. The mighty coalition that had ruled the galaxy for 3 millennia was dying. Honorable Council. Members, Eugene began. I bring greetings from the architects, the species you have known as the Shadow Fleet. I also bring an explanation for everything that has happened and an offer that you must consider carefully. She activated a holographic display that showed star maps extending far beyond anything the Coalition had ever imagined. Entire spiral arms of the galaxy were filled with civilizations that possessed technology beyond Coalition understanding. "The galaxy is much larger and more populated than you realized," she said. "Your coalition represents less than 1% of intelligent life in this region of space." The display changed to show massive structures that dwarfed anything built by known species, cities that orbited entire stars and used their energy to power technologies that seemed like magic, ships that could cross the galaxy in hours rather than years, beings that had transcended physical form and existed as pure consciousness, exploring dimensions beyond normal space-time. "The architects are an ancient species that serves as guardians and evaluators for this galactic community," Eugen continued. "They have been testing the coalition for over 1,000 years to determine if your civilization is ready to join the greater galaxy or if you represent a threat that must be contained." Counselor Zephyra made her wind chime sound, but it was weak and broken. "What kind of test requires attacking our worlds and killing our people?" she demanded. Eugen looked at the Luminari representative with something that might have been pity. "The test was not about military strength," she said. "It was about wisdom and cooperation and how you treat those you consider inferior." The Shadow. Fleet attacks were designed to create stress that would reveal your true nature under pressure. She gestured, and the display showed tactical analyses of every coalition response to Shadow Fleet raids. "You failed catastrophically," she said. "When faced with superior force, you responded with rigid thinking and hierarchical command structures that made adaptation impossible. When your strategies failed, you blamed subordinates rather than examining your own assumptions. When offered help by species you considered primitive, you dismissed their advice without consideration." The most damning evidence appeared on the display. Recordings of coalition meetings where human suggestions had been rejected and dismissed. "The architects monitored every interaction between coalition species and those you marginalized," Eugen said. "They watched you turn away solutions to your problems because those solutions came from the wrong sources. They saw you choose pride over survival and prejudice over cooperation." High Admiral Kor then struggled to his feet with obvious difficulty. "The coalition has maintained peace and order for 3,000 years, he said. "We have brought stability to hundreds of worlds and dozens of species. How can this be considered failure?" Eugen nodded respectfully, but her answer was devastating. "You maintained order through force and fear," she said. "You brought stability by suppressing innovation and change. You created peace by demanding that everyone conform to your vision of how civilization should function. The architects were evaluating whether your methods could work on a galactic scale with truly advanced species." She paused and looked around the great hall that had once seemed so magnificent and now felt small and shabby. "The test results showed that your civilization lacks the flexibility and wisdom necessary for galactic citizenship. Your rigid caste system and emotional suppression create fundamental weaknesses that would make you a liability rather than an asset in the greater community." Counselor Ithsek clicked his mandibles nervously. "What does this mean for the coalition?" he asked. "Will the architects destroy us for failing their evaluation?" Eugen smiled for the first time since entering the hall. "No," she said. "The architects do not destroy civilizations that fail their tests. They simply quarantine them until they either evolve or die out naturally. Your space would be sealed off from the greater galaxy, and you would be left to face the consequences of your choices alone." The implications hit the council members like physical blows. Isolation would mean no access to the advanced technologies and knowledge that flowed between galactic civilizations. It would mean facing every crisis and challenge with only their own limited resources. It would mean watching their civilization slowly decay while the rest of the galaxy moved forward without them. However, Eugen continued, the architects have made an exception in this case. They extend membership in the greater community not to the coalition, but to the Free Worlds Alliance. They recognize humanity's unique gift for seeing worth where others see weakness and for building inclusive societies that welcome all species. She activated a new display that showed the human colonies and their remarkable achievements, cities that grew like living things and ships that moved through space like creatures swimming through an ocean of stars, agricultural worlds where Dozens of species worked together to create abundance that they shared freely. Medical facilities where human doctors worked alongside alien specialists to develop treatments that benefited everyone. The Free Worlds Alliance represents everything the architects value in galactic citizens, Eugene said. Emotional intelligence that enables cooperation across species barriers. Adaptive thinking that finds solutions to unprecedented problems. Inclusive values that judge individuals by their contributions rather than their origins. Hope that drives innovation and exploration even in the face of impossible challenges. Architect Prime Resonance materialized in the center of the hall as a shimmering column of energy that spoke in harmonics that touched every mind present. The evaluation is complete, the entity said. The Coalition has demonstrated patterns of thinking that make them unsuitable for galactic citizenship. The Free Worlds Alliance has demonstrated qualities that make them valuable additions to our community. The architect's presence filled the hall with alien music and impossible colors. We offer the Free Worlds Alliance full membership in the greater community with access to knowledge and technology beyond your current understanding. We offer the Coalition the choice between isolation and fundamental change. Counselor Vextar's crystal body flickered with desperate light. What kind of change? He asked. What would the Coalition need to do to avoid quarantine? The architect's response was both simple and impossible. Abandon hierarchy in favor of cooperation. Embrace emotion as strength rather than weakness. Judge worth by contribution rather than species origin. Accept that those you consider inferior may possess wisdom you lack. Transform your civilization into something that serves all members rather than just the ruling classes. The silence that followed was deafening. Every council member understood that what the architect demanded would mean the end of everything they had built and believed in for millennia. It would require admitting that they had been wrong about fundamental principles of civilization and governance. Director Hyewan Jang entered the hall as Chancellor of the Free Worlds Alliance, accompanied by representatives from 47 different species that had joined the human-led confederation. She wore simple clothes and bore no symbols of rank or authority, but her presence commanded respect in a way that Coalition pageantry never had. Counselor Vexitar, she said, addressing the Kythera leader directly. You measured us by your limitations and found us wanting. You saw our tears and missed our determination. You saw our compassion and missed our strength. You saw our emotions and called them primitive. But those emotions are what allowed us to build something greater than ourselves. She gestured to the diverse group that accompanied her. These are species you dismissed as inferior, but they possess gifts that your rigid thinking could never appreciate. The Valdris understand trade and resource management better than any. Coalition economist. The Himari design buildings that last for millennia without maintenance.